Thank you for viewing this recorded presentation of the Board of Directors Orientation for Developing Honor Societies. Congratulations on being appointed or elected to the Board of Directors for your Developing Honor Society. Within the next 2 to 3 years, you will play a vital role in helping your Developing Honors Society build membership, develop programs, and meet the standards necessary to apply to become an official chapter of Sigma Theta Tau International, or Sigma. In order to create a healthy and thriving honor society that hopefully will be approved to charter and become a chapter of Sigma, your role as a strong and effective leader is vital. The objectives of today's presentation are to review Developing Honor Society leader qualifications, review individual board members' roles, define the responsibility of the board as a whole, outline effective board meeting practices, discuss conflict and conflict resolution, define the Sigma mission and vision and what that means to you, and finally, we will discuss tips for a successful board of directors. There are 3 required criteria that a member must meet in order to be eligible for a leadership role, in addition to general membership criteria. First, in order to serve in any board or committee position, you must be an active member of the Developing Honor Society. Sigma defines an active member as a member who has paid the annual dues. Even though you are not yet a chapter, Developing Honor Societies should use the same criteria to define active members as it is defined in the bylaws, which your board of directors will adopt in the upcoming months if you have not done so already. As you are getting the Honor Society started, your board members will not yet be inducted Honor Society members or have paid dues until you hold your first induction. There should be an understanding that the board and committee members will pay those dues and be inducted at the first Honor Society induction ceremony and continue to pay annual Honor Society dues throughout their term. If your Honor Society is approved to become a chapter of Sigma, the officers will be required to accept the invitation to be inducted into Sigma in order to be installed as officers during the chartering ceremony for your new chapter. If any board members are already Sigma members, they will need to transfer their membership or add a dual membership to join the new chapter at the chartering ceremony and be installed as officers in the new chapter. Second, the leader or potential leader should sign a consent to serve form. There is a sample form available through the Additional Resources link on the online chapter development portal. The form states that the candidate or leader understands their name has been placed on the ballot for office, and if elected, they will accept the position and fulfill the responsibilities of the office or committee for their term. They should sign and date the form. The form should also include their name, credentials, home address, home and cell phone numbers, business title, business address and phone number if applicable, and an email address, preferably a personal and not a university provided. In the case of your first board, you are not being placed on a ballot because you are being appointed. However, you could alter the wording on the form to better fit the appointed board if you wish. Lastly, the board members must be willing to give a term commitment. Board positions are usually for a term of 2 years. However, as you start your Developing Honor Society, you will want to alter some of the terms by staggering so that not all of the board and committee members end their term at the same time. By staggering some 2- and 3-year terms for your first board and committees, you can ensure future consistency and effective leadership transitions. It will also be easier for the Leadership Succession Committee to find candidates for 3 or 4 positions on the first election ballot than to find candidates for all board and committee positions. You can make changes to the Honor Society bylaws template in the Terms section. We will discuss the bylaws in depth later during this development module. In addition to the required criteria for board members, you should look at what leadership skills the individual has and how those skills could benefit the Honor Society. For example, someone with leadership experience with another professional organization or honor society may be a good candidate for president, while a person who is organized, good with numbers, and good with budgeting could be a good candidate for treasurer. If you have already appointed your first board, the Leadership Succession Committee should keep these qualities in mind as they move forward over the next few years and start to choose members to develop for leadership roles. If you have not yet appointed a full board, keep these qualities in mind as you select and appoint the rest of the board members. All board members should be passionate about the Sigma mission and values. I will discuss these later in this presentation. We will now briefly discuss the roles of each member of the Board of Directors before we talk about the board as a whole. We will start with the responsibilities of the President. The President acts as an executive officer for all business of the Developing Honor Society, prepares a calendar and agenda for the board and membership meetings, finalizes committee appointments recommended by the board, and delegates responsibilities not otherwise specified in the bylaws. The President also ensures that at least one business meeting, 2 programs, and 1 induction are conducted each year, can serve as an ex officio member of all committees except for the Leadership Succession Committee, and prepares an annual report to give to the board and membership at the annual business meeting. The Vice President will perform the duties of the President in the President's absence, serve as a chair on committees as needed, succeeds into the office of the President until the next election if the President cannot fulfill their term, and finally shall oversee the planning of chapter programs, ensuring at least 2 programs and 1 business meeting are held each year. The Secretary records and writes the minutes for each board and business meeting, and then distributes the minutes to all board members after each meeting. They also keep an official record of the minutes to give to their successor and to submit with the chapter charter application. They order printed materials for the Developing Honor Society, prepare Developing Honor Society correspondence, send membership invitations to eligible candidates, and serve on committees as needed. The role of Secretary in the Developing Honor Society is very important. When you submit your application to become a chapter, the reviewers will look for thorough meeting minutes that show the Honor Society Board's ability to work together to accomplish the goals that they have set forth. Keeping members informed and engaged is also vital to the health of the Developing Honor Society. You may choose to create a Facebook page, start a Twitter account, or have a web page on the School of Nursing website. Most likely, an electronic form of communication may be more effective than traditional mail correspondence. You may choose to appoint a communications committee to assist the Secretary with digital media. But ultimately, the Secretary should ensure the minutes are recorded and information is sent to members and potential inductees. Some Developing Honor Societies and chapters choose to appoint a recording secretary who keeps the minutes and other written documents, and a corresponding secretary who handles the communication with members. You can choose what will work best for your Developing Honor Society. The Treasurer is the custodian of the Honor Society funds. The Treasurer also prepares and presents a financial report for the board at each meeting and prepares the annual budget, We strongly suggest the Developing Honor Society conducts a biennial or annual audit facilitated by the Treasurer. This is strongly suggested for both honor societies as well as Sigma chapters, but it is not a requirement. The Treasurer will need to investigate state or local government regulations regarding if the Honor Society needs to register in any capacity. Every state or country has different policies and regulations on whether or not an organization must register for activities such as fundraising. The Treasurer should ensure that the Honor Society is complying with all state or local government rules. Consult with your state's Attorney General or local government agency for this information. You may also be able to consult with the university's organization committee for students or another student organization within the university or college. If they have been operating for several years, they may already have the information you need. The staff at Sigma are limited as far as any advice we can give regarding this matter, because every state, province, and country's requirements are different. We recommend that the Treasurer be bonded in an amount equal to 3/4 of the Honor Society's worth. This is another item that is not required of developing honor societies or chapters, but is strongly recommended. The Treasurer is also responsible for developing and maintaining fiscal policies with the board's approval. Once officially a chapter, the Treasurer will be responsible for completing the financial portion of the Sigma Chapter Annual Report. For chapters in the United States, they will also be responsible for submitting reports required by law, such as the IRS 990 form. Treasurers in chapters outside of the United States may also be required by local or national law to submit such reports. The counselor is the only board member who is required to be faculty at the institution of higher education. In the case of a counselor representing a practice setting in an at-large honor society or at-large chapter, the counselor is not required to hold a specific position at the practice setting, but must be employed there. The counselor representing the School of Nursing is required to be faculty because they are the one who secures the necessary data from the school to determine membership eligibility and leads the procedure for determining eligibility and conducting inductions. The counselor also should work to develop strategies to increase visibility to promote and inform students and professional nurses of the Honor Society. And finally, the counselor is required to sit as a member of the governance committee. They can be appointed as the committee chair, but this is not a requirement. The Governance Committee is a required standing committee made up of 3 elected or appointed members. One of those members must be the counselor. The president of the Honor Society will choose a chairperson after the committee is elected or appointed and with the approval of the board of directors. Other members of the board can sit on the governance committee. However, we strongly recommend you provide opportunities for additional Honor Society members to hold leadership roles outside of those members filling the 5 required officer positions. This will make for stronger leadership, as some work can be delegated and more evenly distributed. The Governance Committee Chair is responsible for overseeing the membership eligibility issues. They should also lead the bylaws amendment and approval process and update the bylaws to comply with changes made at the international level, ensuring that the Honor Society or chapter is always using the most current bylaws template. The chair will report to the board any changes needed to the bylaws and present the changes to the board for their approval. The Leadership Succession Chair oversees the Leadership Succession Committee, whose main goal is to identify members with good leadership potential and work to develop those leadership skills. Getting members who are already busy outside of the organization to donate their time to volunteer as a leader can be difficult. The ideal candidates to serve on the Leadership Succession Committee, and ultimately to be the chair, should be excited about the Honor Society and be able to get others excited to serve as well. Creating a list of reasons why serving as a leader is beneficial to the member will help get members excited about the possibility of having a leadership role. The Leadership Succession Chair will guide the committee as they develop interested and qualified members for future leadership roles. They will also manage the preparation, distribution, and tallying of election ballots, and then notify all candidates of the results. A few notes about the members of the Leadership Succession Committee and Chair. The members of the Leadership Succession Committee are not permitted to be on the ballot for officer or committee positions. The members of the first Leadership Succession Committee can be appointed. However, after that, all future members of the committee must be elected, and the president will appoint a chair from those elected to the committee. Additional information regarding each required position, as well as some optional positions, are available on the SIGMA website. On the top of the Board of Directors Orientation Module form in the Online Development Portal, there is a link to this webpage titled Resources for Appointing the First Board of Directors. Each webpage for required board members has an orientation video specific for that role. If you have not already viewed the page and video associated with your position, please do so. You can also review the descriptions of the optional positions to decide if the Honor Society will utilize any of these, either now or in the future. To keep from becoming overwhelmed, most developing honor societies choose to add only 1 to 2 optional positions per year, if any, as they grow. Only the required positions must be filled at the time of application for chapter status, so you may choose not to utilize any of the optional positions until a later time. A fiduciary is an individual in whom another has placed the utmost trust and confidence to manage and protect property and money. Although the treasurer is responsible for managing and maintaining the day-to-day finances of the Honor Society and future chapter, and reporting the financial status to the board, the entire board has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the financial assets on behalf of the membership. The board of directors as a whole is ultimately responsible for the wise and effective management of the Honor Society's financial resources. In order to do this, the board should adopt an annual budget consistent with the Honor Society's goals and financial resources. In order to ensure that the finances are handled consistently and responsibly, the board should also establish written financial policies and procedures. These could include how deposits are made, how reimbursement checks are dispersed, and how receipts are turned in and handled. You may also include a policy regarding who the signatories on the bank account will be and the procedure by which funds are approved or withdrawn from the account. The board should also monitor the income and disbursement of funds on a regular schedule by reviewing the report and bank statement that the treasurer should provide at each board meeting. To go a step further, we strongly recommend that the Honor Society have a financial audit completed annually, once per year, or biennially, once every 2 years. This is not a requirement, but it is recommended to help safeguard the Developing Honor Society and future chapters' assets. If the Honor Society cannot afford a full audit to be done by a third-party CPA or certified public accountant, you could ask the members if they have a spouse, friend, or family member who is an accountant or has auditing experience who would be willing to donate their time. You could also consider asking the School of Finance or Accounting in your institution of higher education if they could provide the service. Sometimes a professor, associate professor, master's student, or senior student will agree to do an audit or review at no cost to the Developing Annual Honor Society. The board will then provide an annual financial report to the members at the annual business meeting. And finally, at some point, your future chapter may want to invest some of the chapter's money. This decision should be made by the board. Most chapters are in operation for several years before investing becomes a priority, so this is not something you need to take on in the near future. The next topic I will cover only applies to groups within the United States. If your Developing Honor Society is located outside of the United States, you will need to research your own local and national laws for the requirements to register as an organization or file income or tax information. For Developing Honor Societies in the United States, SGMA does not currently require that you obtain an employer identification number from the IRS for your Developing Honor Society, although it may be beneficial to do such things as open a bank account. The Employer Identification Number, or EIN, is also referred to as the tax ID number. Some honor societies have trouble opening bank accounts without an EIN, or their state may require them to have one. If you do decide that you need an EIN, you can apply online on the IRS website, and it usually takes about 30 minutes. If the Honor Society is approved to become a chapter of SGMA, they will apply for and be issued an EIN under the SGMA Blanket 501c3 tax-exempt umbrella, even if the group applied for its own EIN as a Developing Honor Society. Any money you bring from the Honor Society to the chapter will be reported as income on your first report to the IRS under the new chapter EIN number. For further information regarding EIN, please refer to the IRS website. Please also note that receiving an EIN number as a Developing Honor Society does not mean that you have 501c3 federal tax exempt status or that you are considered a nonprofit organization in your state. You may still be required to register at the state level. According to the instructions for the current revision of the EIN application, the responsible party is defined as the person who has a level of control over or entitlement to the funds or assets in the entity that, as a practical matter, enables the individual, directly or indirectly, to control, manage, or direct the entity and the disposition of its funds and assets. The responsible party is also a contact person for the IRS in the case that the application is incomplete or there are other questions. The responsible party will be required to give their Social Security number or personal tax ID number. At the time of the charter application approval and before chartering with SGMA as a chapter, an SS4 form will need to be filled out and the chapter will receive an EIN number under the SGMA Blanket 501c3 tax-exempt status. If you have an EIN for the Developing Honor Society, you will enter that on the form and the IRS will either issue a new chapter EIN and eliminate your Developing Honor Society EIN, or use the Developing Honor Society EIN number and transfer it to the chapter's name and under the 501c3 umbrella of Sigma. As a chapter, this will then require you to submit a 990 form every year with the IRS in November to report the income of the chapter for that past fiscal year. At that time every year, you can change the responsible party if the officers have changed. It is important to discuss this now because if your application to become a chapter is approved, you are required to file an SS4 form and obtain an EIN number under Sigma's blanket. If no one is willing to be the contact person and list their information on the SS4 form, you will not be allowed to charter and have a Sigma chapter. If you have any additional concerns about this process, please contact the Sigma chapter development staff. Once again, this information is only applicable to chapters who will be permanently located within the United States. Now that we've briefly defined the roles of the individual board members and discussed the financial responsibilities of the board as a whole, we will move our focus to the rest of the responsibilities of the board of directors. The primary function of the Honor Society leadership is to maintain the strength, integrity, and function of the developing Honor Society. There are three main underlying responsibilities that all leaders should embody. Those are care, which requires leaders to be diligent and prudent in managing the organization's affairs. This includes ensuring that all developing Honor Society activities are aligned with the overall mission, vision, and values of Sigma. The second is loyalty, meaning that the leaders will maintain allegiance to the developing Honor Society when making decisions, and that personal gains do not influence any board activities. And the third is obedience, which requires that leaders act in accordance with the organization's bylaws, as well as all applicable state, local, provincial, or federal laws or regulations. These responsibilities are common to all developing Honor Society leaders and should be identified and cultivated in potential future leaders by the Leadership Succession Committee. All developing Honor Society leaders must keep these three duties in mind as they conduct the Honor Society business. For a group to effectively complete a body of work, the entire group needs to participate. This often means that responsibilities and tasks need to be delegated in order to be completed. When a group member is delegated a task, they have to be personally accountable for that task. The person delegating the responsibilities must trust the person that they are delegating to and empower them to complete the work needed. When the final application is submitted, the reviewers will look for a level of involvement and collaboration between all board members, not just one or two persons doing all of the work. In order to be successful, the board must utilize their time to conduct the business of the Honor Society in the most efficient manner. You may have been a part of a board before, but remember that not all of the Honor Society leaders may have had that experience. New members that you are considering for future leadership most likely will not have had that leadership experience either. So establishing norms and expectations and keeping them consistent will lead to successful board meetings now and in the future. Provide all members with a document to explain the rules of order. Define the code of conduct, and advise all board members that Sigma utilizes Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised edition. These norms should be established in the Policies and Procedures Manual. All board and committee members should be aware of them. If you are having a physical meeting, it may be helpful to have a hard copy available to reference if needed during the meeting. If you're having a physical meeting, use the same location if possible, or rotate evenly if there are 2 or more groups applying to be an at-large chapter. Arrange tables in a U or square shape to allow for maximum communication. If you're meeting virtually, make sure all board members know how to log into the meeting and are capable of participating in the discussion. Meet at least monthly, in person as able or virtually as needed, as this will create better board relations and give the board time to cover important topics. For honor societies starting out and working through phase 2 of development, you may need to meet more frequently, either as smaller committees or as a full board. The committees or full board may also need to meet more frequently when getting close to a program or induction in order to finalize details and preparations. This is only a suggestion, and you can meet as often as you wish or need. After you have established the structure of the Honor Society and have most of the heavy planning done in phase 2, you could choose to meet less frequently. Many established Sigma chapters meet monthly to bi-monthly, and most utilize virtual platforms for at least some of their meetings. Plan the time and date for all meetings 1 year in advance to allow board members the maximum amount of planning time. Remind everyone of the next meeting date and location at the close of the meeting. Use an electronic calendar that will send reminders when possible. It may also help to pick the same date and time each month. For example, the first Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. Obtain reports or resolutions from committees, task forces, and advisory councils early enough so that they can be distributed to the board for review prior to the board meeting. If background information or documentation is needed for resolution recommendations, it should also be submitted at that time. Board members should review all material prior to the meeting to ensure that the meeting can proceed efficiently. An agenda is used to inform everyone of what will be discussed at the upcoming meeting so that everyone has time to prepare to discuss the topics at hand. You should have a standard process for adding items to the agenda, which will be something to develop in your Policies and Procedures Manual. Create and distribute the agenda 1 to 2 weeks in advance. If you are meeting bi-weekly, you may have a shorter time frame. Discuss as a board what will work for you. Use the same template for each of the meeting minutes, and include information on the top of the page, such as the date, time, location, and a list of board members who will attend. Place the most important or time-sensitive topics at the top of the agenda to ensure that there is sufficient time to cover those items. Any items not discussed will then be tabled and moved to the agenda for the following meeting and prioritized by urgency and importance. Assign a board member to discuss each item on the agenda. Keep the agenda realistic and allow time for discussion, 10 minutes or more per topic. Send any additional documentation or background information needed for agenda items along with the meeting notice. When the meeting date arrives, stop and end on time. If you know you will be late, call or message the other board members to make sure they are aware. Post the Sigma mission and vision statements and the Honor Society objectives in the meeting room or have a hard copy available. This will help keep the underlying values in mind while conducting the business of the Honor Society. Use an overhead projector, LCD projector, or flip chart to display the agenda. Or the secretary should provide a hard copy of the agenda to each board member. If you are meeting virtually, use a public forum where you will able to share the computer screen so that all in attendance are able to view the agenda. If you would like, you could utilize a flip chart to document discussions and decisions during the meeting, and then document those in the meeting minutes. If you're meeting virtually, the secretary should be the person sharing their screen for others so that they can see as the secretary is taking down decisions or tabling discussions for a later meeting. Some of you may have served on a board of directors for other organizations or even for a Sigma chapter. However, some of you may be new to serving as a board member. Association Now published some key items to being a better board member. Do your homework before meetings. This will allow board meetings to go smoothly. If everyone is aware of the agenda and has reviewed all materials provided prior to the meeting, you will be able to have informed discussions with all board members actively involved and accomplish more items on the agenda. Be an active listener and a full participant. Every board member has different ideas and experiences. If all board members are willing to listen to the ideas of others and actively participate in discussions, it will lead to better communication and more efficient meetings. Have an open mind. This goes with being an active listener. Actively listen to the ideas and opinions of the other board members and keep an open mind while you have the discussion. Just because it is not your way does not mean that it will not work. Be open-minded about the suggestions that other board members make. Challenge yourself to grow as a leader. By always striving to be the best leader you can be, you will also inspire other board members, potential future leaders, and the members of your developing honor society. And finally, lead change and do not resist it. As you are starting out your journey to apply for chapter charter status with Sigma, you will have to embrace change. This will never stop, even if you eventually successfully apply and charter as a chapter. The dynamics of your developing honor society and potential chapter will change over time, and the leaders must be willing to see what needs changed, propose a solution, and then assist in making the decision to implement the change. Now I want to shift focus to talk about how to deal with conflict. It is a fact of life that disagreements occur in almost all team environments. Disagreements occur when everyone is being open and honest with their opinion, which is a good thing. However, conflict is more than just a disagreement. It is a situation where one or both parties perceive that there is a threat. It is important to remember that it is a perceived threat. Conflicts will continue to fester when ignored. Because conflicts involve perceived threats to our well-being and survival, they stay with us until we face and resolve them. We respond to conflicts based on our perceptions of the situation and not necessarily to an objective review of the facts. Our perceptions are influenced by our life experiences, culture, values, and beliefs. Conflicts are an opportunity for growth. When you are able to resolve conflict in a relationship, it builds trust. You can feel secure knowing your relationship can survive challenges and disagreements. Siegel and Smith, writers for helpguide.org, a mental health website, have given us some unhealthy responses to conflict. An inability to recognize and respond to things that matter to the other person. Explosive, angry, hurtful, and resentful actions. An inability to compromise or see the other person's side. or the fear and avoidance of conflict due to the expectations of a bad outcome. Also, courtesy of helpguide.org, we have some tips to help manage and resolve personal conflict. If there is a conflict in your group and it does not involve you in any way, you might also use these tips to facilitate a conversation between those who are involved. Managing and resolving conflict requires the ability to quickly reduce stress and bring your emotions into balance. You can ensure that the process is as positive as possible by sticking to the following guidelines. Listen for what is felt as well as what is said. The most important information exchanged during conflicts and arguments is often communicated non-verbally. Nonverbal communication is conveyed by emotionally driven facial expressions, posture, gesture, pace, tone, and intensity of voice. Make conflict resolution the priority rather than winning or being right. Maintaining and strengthening the relationship rather than winning the argument should always be your first priority. Be respectful of the other person and his or her viewpoint. Focus on the present. If you are holding on to grudges based on past resentments, your ability to see the reality of the current situation will be impaired. Rather than looking to the past and assigning blame, focus on what you can do in the here and now to solve the problem. Pick your battles. Conflicts can be draining, so it is important to consider whether the issue is really worthy of your time and energy. Be willing to forgive. Resolving conflict is impossible if you are unwilling or unable to forgive. Resolution lies in releasing the urge to punish, which can never compensate for our losses and only adds to our injury by further depleting and draining our lives. And know when to let something go. If you cannot come to an agreement, agree to disagree. It takes two people to keep an argument going. If a conflict is going nowhere, you can choose to disengage and move on. I will end today with talking about the overall mission of Sigma and some tips for a successful Developing Honor Society. When you submit your application to become a chapter of Sigma, the reviewers will be looking for proof that the Honor Society can move on and become a strong, sustainable chapter that will follow and support the overall mission and values of Sigma. Everything you do as a Developing Honor Society should, at its core, support the mission, which is advancing world health and celebrating nursing excellence in scholarship, leadership, and service. Additionally, the Sigma values of love, courage, and honor should be a part of everything your honor society does. As an honor society, you should decide how you will work to support the mission and values of Sigma and develop the mission statement specifically for your honor society. And finally, the chapter development staff has compiled a list of tips to keep in mind to be successful as you form your Developing Honor Society. Always keep the Sigma mission and values in mind when doing business on behalf of the Honor Society. Member benefits and programs should benefit the members and support the mission and values. Be sure to communicate the mission and values to your members and potential members, as it will help them feel that they belong to an organization with a purpose. All Board of Directors members should be engaged and dedicated. There have been cases where one or two board members are doing all of the work. This will put a strain on the Developing Honor Society. Make sure all of the board members understand the time investment and are willing and able to give the time needed. As a part of the application, the reviewers will look for full board participation in meeting minutes and other documentation. Be willing to reevaluate, change, and evolve. As your board starts planning for programs and member benefits for your developing Honor Society members, they may have ideas that seem wonderful in the planning stages, but fall short of member and potential member expectations. Be willing to acknowledge that something did not work and make changes so that it works better in the future. Members who see that the Honor Society is open to their opinions will be engaged members who want to stay active. Some developing honor societies and chapters are much more focused on the student members. This often happens because the honor society and chapters are rooted within the School of Nursing, and the faculty may comprise much of the board. However, remember that most of those members inducted as students are only going to be students for a few more months or a year. They need to see that after graduation, the Honor Society and future chapter will still have something to offer them as they move on in their career. Focus on finding nurse leaders from the community that can help you expand the benefits for non-student members. Be sure to plan benefits that non-student members will find engaging and worth maintaining an active membership. You should consult with Sigma staff as you are prompted to within the development modules, and also as often as you need to outside of that. We are here specifically to help you through this process of developing your Honor Society and applying to become a chapter of Sigma. During the development phase modules, you will be instructed on what documents to submit to Sigma staff to review throughout each step. This is to ensure that you are meeting all requirements, so there are no surprise issues when you're ready to submit the final application. Again, we are here to help answer any questions you may have, in addition to the regularly scheduled webinars and meetings. Good communication between board members will make the planning process much smoother. A board that can effectively communicate and makes it a point to communicate regularly will have an easier time throughout the planning process. Don't forget to also communicate regularly with your members as well to keep them connected and engaged. As you move through this development module, you will be instructed to download some talking points that are meant to help the board get to know one another and establish a foundation for board interactions. You will then meet with Sigma chapter development staff to review the bylaws that will guide your Honor Society. You will watch 2 additional pre-recorded webinars that will introduce you to the Sigma Sustainability Pyramid and developing policies and procedures. Throughout the development process, ensure that you are keeping complete and detailed meeting minutes for each board, committee, or task force meeting that is held, and that these minutes are being uploaded in the modules where instructed. As we've mentioned several times, these meeting minutes give the reviewers a more personal glimpse into the development of the Honor Society and helps to support the application. Additionally, there is a section on almost every form where the Developing Honor Society can write additional comments for the reviewers. We recommend that you use these comment fields to give the reviewers a narrative of the successes the Honor Society experienced while working through this module, or any setbacks and how those were overcome. If you have any questions regarding anything presented in this recording today, or about anything else related to chapter development, please go back to the online development and application portal and use the consult and meeting request form link at the top of the page to request a meeting with Sigma chapter development staff. If you have the email address or phone number for the chapter development staff you've already met with, feel free to contact them personally as well. Thank you again for reviewing this recorded presentation and for agreeing to serve as a leader for your Developing Honor Society.